And within the first month that I was there, I knew there was something off about the Asia results. So I went to my boss and said, this just doesn't add up. The FTEs, the full-time equivalents, don't seem to be right. The expenses are off, the revenue's off. And his response was, basically, no, the results are okay, you're just not smart enough to understand them. So my gut was telling me there's something majorly wrong here. If your gut is telling you there's something majorly wrong, especially if it has to do with your money, or if it has to do with somebody else's money, if you're at an employer and your gut tells you there's something majorly wrong, listen to your gut. It will steer you right in 99.9% of the situations. And if it doesn't, the worst thing that will happen is no harm, no foul. But I think it's really important to trust your instincts and to trust your gut. And again, in the Madoff situation, I'd be willing to bet that 99% of those investors, if they trusted their gut, at some point when they were invested with Madoff, there was something some little niggling feeling that there's something not right about this. And they would be in a much better position today if they had followed their gut. A little personal anecdote in terms of trusting your gut, especially since apparently women use more health care than men do. After I had my first heart attack at 40, I was being treated by a male cardiologist, someone I'd been assigned to when I was in the hospital. And this was throughout the summer of 2003. And I was seeing a cardiologist every 2 weeks, but I wasn't feeling any better. And he just kept saying, it's going to take time, it's going to take time, it's going to take time. I had all the time in the world, but I really wanted to feel better. So finally, in late September, 4 months after I'd had this heart attack, I still wasn't feeling any better, and the cardiologist sort of threw up his hand and said, well, I don't really know what to do with you. The majority of my patients are geriatric and male, and clearly you're not geriatric and you're not male, and I don't really know what to do with you. So again, if I had trusted my gut early on that summer, I probably would have felt a lot better a lot sooner, but I didn't. So again, the bottom line for me here is trust your gut. Now, in terms of learning to love negotiating, how many people here feel like they're a competent negotiator? Ooh, that's good. That's very, very good. I'm impressed. That's good. That, to me, is probably the most important skill that I've learned in my 11 years at the Warhol Foundation and in my 25-year career. Because it can be, again, it can be negotiating a salary, it can be negotiating a lease, it can be negotiating personally a house purchase, a car purchase. It can mean the difference between a 1% raise and a 5% raise. It can mean the difference between a 7% mortgage and a 4.5% mortgage. That's real money. So the more you learn to love negotiating, the better off you're going to be. And again, that's not just personally, it's professionally as well. In terms of negotiating, I essentially negotiate every day. The foundation sells a lot of art, and my role is on the foundation side. We have 2 sales agents who are commission-based, so it's in their best interest, obviously, to have the prices be as high as possible. It's in the foundation's interest, yeah, to have a high price, but the agent's interest is getting as high a price as possible, and they're willing to sit on stuff, whereas the foundation's interest at this point is to sell as much art as at high a price as the market will bear. But we do want to move the stuff because it costs us about $2.5 million a year for the care and feeding of the collection. So the sooner we get the collection out the door, the sooner we don't spend the $2.5 million, and the sooner that money can be put to work, making grants, earning investment income, and so forth. So with regard to negotiating, you can start small and build. In terms of a personal example, I'd been at the Warhol Foundation for about 5 years and realized that I wasn't able to do a lot of things because I didn't have enough vacation time. So I thought, well, there's got to be a way that I can negotiate this with the president of the foundation. So about the time we were scheduled to get our cost of living increases, I went into his office and said, I really don't want the cost of living. It wasn't that much money. It was, it wasn't really something that was going to make or break for me. But what I really want is additional vacation time. I just bought a house on the Jersey Shore. and I really wanted to be able to spend more time there. So he said, well, come up with a plan and we'll see what we can do. So what I did was I said, all right, the raise is worth X, and that translates to Y number of days. So I went in and said, I'm not going to take the raise, but I want 13 additional days of vacation. He did not blink an eye. He did not say no. He simply said, all right, the only caveat is you can't take it all at one time. Okay, that's fine. So now I have 7 weeks of vacation. But that's the power of negotiating, because I was prepared for him to say, you can't have 13 days, you can only have 5. And my go-to position, you should have, when you're negotiating, you should have a minimum and a maximum and a go-to. And obviously the reason for the minimum is because you don't want to go below that, or it's not going to be a good deal for you. The go-to is sort of a compromise. It's not sort of, it is a compromise position. The maximum is just, the stars in terms of what you think in any particular negotiation. So for me, the go-to was an additional 8 days. He never went to my go-to. He just said, sure, yeah, whatever, do what you want, do what you want. And that was great. Okay, in terms of the fun part of finance, it's something that you do every day. You negotiate every day. You pay bills at least once a month, probably a couple of times a month. If you're online paying bills, maybe you're paying bills every day. It's really a part of your everyday life. It becomes a part of the fabric of your everyday life, and you really need to get comfortable with it. For me, the best way to get comfortable with something is for it to be fun. So how do you make finance fun? Well, at the Warhol Foundation, we get to give away stuff, and that makes things really fun. We decided that we would launch something called the Photographic Legacy Program. And what that involved was giving away more than 28,000 Warhol photographs to college and university art museums across the country. So ding, 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 Mount Holyoke College. Wonder why I picked that one. So I knew, obviously, that this program was going on, and we started to get applications in, and Mount Holyoke was not among those applications, even though they'd gotten a letter. So I called Marianne Dozema at the Art Museum and said, what gives? Mount Holyoke should be part of this. And she said, yeah, it's on my desk. I said, well, take it off your desk and send it back. And so she did, and it turned out that because of the way things went, Mount Holyoke ended up with the first gift. And I actually got to deliver that gift personally to the museum. That was very cool and very fun. So figure out ways to make things fun. Professionally, you could do things like that. On a personal basis, in terms of making finance fun, I have an 11-year-old goddaughter who's at a Montessori school in Wilmington, Delaware. And about 2 weeks ago, she and 13 of her classmates and 5 teachers came to New York for a special program at the UN. And so her mom called me up about 6 months ago and said, Ava and the kids are coming to New York, and they've got a couple of nights, and would you be willing to host them at the Warhol Foundation? So I said sure, not knowing whether or not 11-year-olds would be interested at all in the Warhol Foundation. And so they came, and we had a really nice evening, and they asked a lot of really great questions. And now we've introduced a new generation of kids, not only to Warhol, but also to the concept of philanthropy. Because that's one of the things that we talked a lot about that night was, what does it mean to give back? And I think the majority of them in the room were aware of the fact that their parents were philanthropically minded. And some of them were collecting, on Halloween they were collecting for UNICEF. So they sort of got the concept. But I think the fact that, this guy way back when he wrote his will in the early 70s, the fact that he had enough forethought to think, well, I don't have, he didn't have a spouse or a significant other, he didn't have any children, and he made 3 bequests, one to a business manager and one each to his 2 brothers, but he didn't really have anybody else to whom he wanted to leave the bulk of his estate. And the fact that these kids got the idea that, gee, if, at some point in time, if I have a little money, maybe I can do something like this, and that will not only be my legacy, but it will also allow things to be funded that were important to me when I was around. So that was kind of a cool concept as well. Andrea has asked us to fill in the phrase, I'm successful at my job because, and then I'll stop. I'm successful in my job because I really